Traumedy and Grime Through Addiction, Caregiving, and Never Being Too Late, featuring Dr. Nicki Monti. Dr. Nicki Monti, therapist, speaker, and author of the memoir The Divine Traumedy of Nicki J, a true grime tale, is an artist when it comes to how she speaks and writes about her story. Dr. Nicki shares her powerful and unconventional journey from addiction to sobriety, and how humor became a lifeline in her recovery. From pursuing acting in California to running a phone sex business, and ultimately becoming a licensed therapist, Dr. Nicki's story challenges stereotypes about what recovery should look like. The conversation explores addiction, pain, and personal responsibility, as well as the overlooked emotional toll of caregiving. Dr. Nicki opens up about caring for her husband during his illness, offering insights that will resonate deeply with caregivers and professionals alike. We discuss why discomfort is often necessary for growth, how laughter can be a powerful therapeutic tool, and why it's never too late to change your life. This episode balances honesty, hope, and humor, reminding listeners that healing doesn't require perfection, just willingness.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
Our guest on this episode of Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast is Dr. Nicki Monti, who is not your typical therapist. Dr. Nicki instantly gets to the core of presented issues and immediately provides a clear path for genuine change. Her no-nonsense approach combines with extraordinary compassion and good humor to offer a clear, authoritative voice free of judgment and full of possibility. She quickly brings forward what others have somehow missed and then offers practical tools for truly productive resolution. She is not only a great listener, but she makes you feel safe, comfortable, and open to what she has to say. She uses wit and her own experiences to reveal what's undermining you and to get you beyond being stuck in your own story. Joining Dr. Nicki in a seminar, session, or event, you will see firsthand her genuine care, humor, and intelligence. Through her insightful advice and encouragement, she assists your most positive, emotional, and life changes. Dr. Nicki's successful book series about being stuck in the story no more, her television appearances, her articles, and podcasts have made her into a household name. Dr. Nicki Monti has been seen on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Millionaire Matchmaker, Love Handles, and many other reality television shows where her compassion, honesty, and genuine expertise shine an instant light on circumstances and offer actual change. To learn more about Nicki, read the podcast notes. Let's welcome Dr. Nicki Monti to the podcast. On this episode of Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast, we want to welcome Dr. Nicki Monti. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to dive into your book, The Divine Traumedy of Nicki J, a true grime tale, which I really enjoyed and can't wait to talk to you about. Before we do, can you give the audience just a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yeah, that's a really broad question. I always ask, when people will say, "How are you today?" I go, "With regards to what?" You need to be a little more specific. But, my background is like many recovered people. There was a lot of a darkness before the dawn, years and decades of darkness and underlying self-esteem problems, to say the least, bad choices and dreadful decisions. And that went on for a really long time based on some assumptions I made about my unworthiness and unlovability. And finally, I got sober and bring this forward, obviously, as this is a program about addiction primarily. And I've been sober, I keep forgetting it's 45 years. It's a long time. It's like your whole life, right? But more. And it's what a good choice that was. At the time, it was just a really painful choice. And I had you take all your stuff into sobriety. And so I had years of working through the real issues that I thought drugs and alcohol were answering, that they were never answering. And so it took me a long time to get to who and how and what I am today, which is, I'm going to say happy, joyous, and free most of the time. And
That's
that's my
great.
story. Yeah.
That's great. The right away I want to get into the divine traumedy of Nicki Joy, a true crime tale.
Grime.
Yeah, Grime.
Yeah.
I love that because and the traumedy that you label it. And one of the things I want to talk about right away is one of the things that I do with another colleague of mine in this space is we talk about the need for laughter and humor in treatment and recovery. And
Hmm.
we speak a lot about it, but we also do a lot of exercises on bringing humor and laughter into it. So when I saw your title right away, I saw that it had traumedy. And then I started reading it. I'm like, this person's got humor. And there's dark humor, there's humor all around.
Yeah.
I love that. And right away I want to know why was that important for that to be a part of how you tell your story, but also the traumedy in the title. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Boy, finding the right title for a book is no easy matter. It really isn't. And my original title was less buoyant, but it turned out to already have been a bad movie. So even if it was a good movie, it would have been a little better, but a bad movie. And I ended up with this. And I was very happy at the way I landed on it. I didn't want my name in the title at the beginning. I fought that and all the things. But one thing about the humor is humor has, yeah, like you say, it's been dark humor, it's been snarky humor, it's been bitter humor, it's been just witty humor, all of those kinds of laughter components. I think really saved my life because the humor was buoyed up in me by hope. Even the dark humor was buoyed up by hope because as much as it reports, as much as humor reports usually an underbelly going on, it also reports a bigger view of things. The dark and the light are of a piece to me. They aren't separate. It would be, day follows night, night follows day, day follows night, night follows day. And that's the way it is. And I like to keep my eye on the whole picture. And even when I was a disaster, first of all, I didn't look like a disaster, which is both helpful and harmful. You know, I was, teeth weren't falling out and things like that. But it was, I looked like I kind of had it together, but if you really looked at the way I was living my life, it was clear that things were not going well. But the whole time, what kept me floating on the top of the ocean rather than drowning in the ocean was humor.
Yeah, I really appreciate it because I think sometimes when we work with addiction, the response is that this is so serious, you have to be serious, and sometimes I think for the person who is trying to seek treatment or even go through recovery, well, they've had their fun. And
Yeah,
a lot of times when I work with people, it's not fun anymore. It is, but then you can't lose that. You can't lose the humor that is
yeah.
what a lot of us want in life. We want to be happy. And I think someone also said, great, like how fun is if recovery is not going to be fun, it's not a, how do you
Yeah,
even
it's
make
no
that
fun. It's
desirable?
hard. People say to me all the time, it's hard. I say, no, no, no kidding. No, you don't get it. It's hard. No, really, I do get it.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
But I kind of have always followed the precept, um, do take the work seriously and take yourself lightly.
I like that.
So you take the work of sobriety, you take the work of learning, you take the work of growing, you take the work of digging into the truth of self seriously. But in the meantime, you take yourself lightly. I think so many times everyone in the world, but certainly addicts are fabulous at this. They take themselves very seriously. You don't understand the drama I've been through. That's why, I love 12-step program because, everybody's laughing. Why are you laughing? Remember, just to veer for a second, and this is in the book, but one of my early, this is in my first year of sobriety, and I was in some meeting, and I was I mean, off the charts furious. I spent a lot of angry time in the opening years because you don't understand how hard it is, and I'm so special. My first thing is
Yeah.
I'm rewriting the book. It's terribly written. So many arrogant people do. And so I was in this meeting, I was screaming about how I knew everybody in the meeting was talking about me, and how dare you talk about me like anybody at the meeting cared at
Right.
all. And I was doing this thing, I was, doing it. It sounded to some people in the meeting, and especially the leader of the meeting, it sounded like I was doing a comedy. He was laughing so hard he was crying. And the more he laughed, the more furious I got. Why do you not understand me? And of course, he was laughing with resonance. He understood exactly what I was saying. And that's one of the things that happens, I think, in group processes. And I run a lot of groups because I love that,
Love
is that,
groups.
yeah, love it, love it. And there's so much, I can be talking to this person over here, and this person over here is getting it all. This person may not be able to hear me because they're in the middle of the thing, right? But it doesn't matter. I say it anyway, and this person is hearing me. And, this person is telling some awful story, but this person over here is laughing because they feel the truth of the story, And that's one thing about laughter. I think we laugh because we feel the truth of what's being said.
Yeah. Now you go by Dr. Nikki,
I
but
do.
there is also in your book you reference quite a bit Edgar Allan Poe in some of
Yes.
his writings, and
Yes.
even at times reference it as like Mrs. Poe.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
what when I was 8 or 9, I was in boarding school from second grade to 12th grade. I mean, I left for vacations in summer, but that was my main place to be, the place I laughingly call home. And but my peers, because I was always a writer, as a poetry and all sorts of things, and little stories about topics like destiny. I mean, who writes about destiny at 8 years old? I'm me. And but my peers in boarding school um, labeled me or named me or tagged me Mrs. Poe because my poetry and my writings were so dark. And but again, humorous. Yeah.
yeah, that was great because I also know it's like why is Edgar Allan Poe keep being referenced once in a while, and then you reference that. I was like that was such a great way to see that and learn more about that. That was really great. I want to ask you about a part with I think about when I think about what I do, I was like, this is amazing to hear. When you talk about the phone sex work that was going on early on and
Mhm.
how that actually led to getting into counseling.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy.
I,
So
I want
yeah,
to hear about that.
yeah, I was always a person who really, I came from an entrepreneurial family. My grandmother was an entrepreneur. My mother was an entrepreneur, and way before, obviously, that was, hip, slick, and cool for women to be that. And also addicts. My mother was an alcoholic and a sex addict. But the idea of coloring outside the lines was just how I rolled. And that was true, while always wanting to be loved and fitting in. So they were sometimes, but there's always somewhere to fit in with.
Hmm.
You could
Yeah.
fit in with the dark drug, sex, and rock and roll crowd, or you could fit in with, ordinary. I now, I hear stories about people who led these sort of what I might call regular lives. They went off to do corporate work, or they did, they became standard operating procedure people, and perfectly fine. They didn't have less pain than me, by the way. We just handled it differently. So because our feelings are what conjoins us all, right? So anyway, I was back. I had come out to California to be a famous actress. Of course, didn't come out to, I have been an actress all my life, but
Hmm.
this is where I was going to be famous. And, it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't about great art, and it wasn't about, uh, I just must. It was about having everybody love me, and then I would prove my parents wrong, and I was lovable indeed, and not a throwaway. But that being said, I came out to California, and I was trying to figure out. I mean, because being a waiter had really bit the dust by, it was just it's a dreadful profession, really. And I have every restaurant I go to every day, and this has been 1,000 years ago that I had that job. I think I'm so glad I don't have her job. I really admire how hard she's having to work for pennies here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was like, how can I go to auditions and do this thing and really, but make some good money and have some flexibility? And that's why people do the waiter job, right? Because they have some flexibility. They can go to their auditions. And I'm not 100% sure of how this idea came into my head, but I thought fantasy phone sex. Now, you have to understand, this was, thank goodness, before cell phones and this kind of a
Oh,
podcast.
yeah.
Oh, we didn't have, I am so grateful because it'd all be out there on the cloud floating around.
Right.
But it isn't. And so it was all on, literally on the phones with real people. There was no AI. We weren't having any fake voices. I mean, okay, the women, and I had some men working for me too, but the women particularly didn't necessarily look like their voice. But it was the thing. So I started this. It was just me and the phone. And as I say in the book, I thought, well, okay, how do I do this? And I thought, oh, let me go get a men's magazine and see who the people are who know stuff about this. I knew a lot about sex because I was a sex addict, but, to whatever that degree that teaches you anything real. And I'm fearless in a lot of ways. So I did find a fellow, and he gave me a lot of very helpful information about how to get this started. And of course, he wanted me to advertise in his magazine, which I believe I did. And I created this agency called Dial a Friend. And I was doing this while using. I was not sober when I started the company. And, I just worked whenever the phone rang, which it rang a lot. It was very successful very quickly. It was like a 1-800 thing, right?
Yeah.
But I was a real person, and I had regulars, and I had, and we would just talk through their sexual fantasies. But lo and behold, as I said in the book, what I found out is that sex was the smallest part of the sex fantasy conversation. All the rest of it was about their loneliness or their feeling of incapacity or the struggles they were having with their wives or whatever, those kinds of things. And those calls went on a long time, and a little bit of it was sex, and most of it was conversation. So then I thought, maybe there should be a phone therapy kind of thing. I had been in therapy all my life trying to get better, get better, get better. And for me, I learned a lot along the way. I was a spiritual person. I was a psychic at one point. I studied being a psychic. I did all these kinds of things trying to feel better about myself. And I learned a lot. But for me, and I bet you'll agree with this, that you can go so far in your learning. If you're an addict and you don't get sober, you will hit the wall. That's it. No more learning to be had until you get sober. And then after a time, the learning that you've accumulated inside of you can rise to the top like cream and can start to serve you in a whole new way. But it's not like you can learn nothing before you're sober. It depends on how you're doing your sobriety, your addiction. So I thought, well, why don't you now? Remember, now they have these things where you can call in and have a person, a therapist.
Yeah, you were telehealth before it was telehealth.
I was telehealth before there was telehealth. I wanted to be telehealth. I'd be a bazillionaire by now. I'd be, but good ideas that lay on the floor are not ideas at all. They're just trash. So anyway, I thought I would do this, and I had this young friend who was the daughter of a man was part of the reason I came to California, and always a man in my conversation. So he had died, and she and I were close, and we were talking. She was like a young daughter kind of person of mine, a surrogate child. And I told her about this phone sex, which I wasn't doing a lot of bragging about, because it was very peripheral. And I like to color outside the lines, but I didn't necessarily give my drawings to everybody, It's be a little bit, hey, so what do you do for a living? Phone sex. Excuse me? I don't
Yeah.
know what that is. Most people didn't, right? And so she said, I think I said, yeah, I'm thinking about starting this phone because some people are too embarrassed to be seen in person, but they want to talk about their issues and their problems and all the things and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm thinking this might be a cool thing to do, to really do phone therapy. And she said, that's it. I think that's a great idea. She was like 19. She said, I think that's a great idea. I think you would be taken more seriously and maybe be able to get investors for your company. That never occurred to me, but investors for your company if you go back to school and get a therapy license. You don't do anything with it, but just get the license. I said, what a great idea. Now I just enter my first year of sobriety. I've been doing phone sex for a few years at this point, made some decent money. And of course, I spend it as fast as I get it because, I'm an addict. But anyway, so I go back to, I go back to school, first year of sobriety. I think, really, I'm going to be a new moving target you can't get. If I keep moving fast enough, I'm going to get through all this rage and this grief and all the things I'm feeling, and I can outrun the feels, right? So I go back to school, and as part of getting my MFCT, marriage, family, child therapy license, I had to do 3,000 hours of direct therapy with people, right? It's supervised therapy. So I got into this clinic. I've always been a good talker. And like I said, I looked better than I felt. And so I was in there, and I was in the first year of sobriety. And it's an unpleasant. I did not have a honeymoon period, which I was very grateful about. I didn't know. I went straight to hell. And there was no honeymoon.
Yeah, so when everyone's
And,
like, "Oh, you get sober and it's amazing and it's
yeah,
great,"
no,
and
no.
it's not how it plays out.
I actually feel badly for people who have the honeymoon period because I know what's on the other end of that, and it is dreadful. And I would rather they have it up front and then go to the blessings of sobriety. So, um, I get into this clinic, and I'm just having this awakening about how great this is and helping people. And I was a mother surrogate in my schools. People always came to me with their problems, and I was just a natural. It just didn't occur to me. And so one day, as you know from the book, one day I was sitting in a session. It was my birthday. I have these monumental experiences on my birthday. It was September 20th. And it was my birthday, and I was sitting in a session, and this was a low fee clinic, that a scale clinic,
Mhm.
right? So this poor guy is just as nervous as can be about the whole business, and he's kind of scrawny, and he's, doing these things. And he's sort of nervous, and I'm listening to him, and his pain is obvious, and I'm watching him, and all of a sudden, this wave of knowing moves through me. I mean, it really felt like being struck by lightning, it just waved through me. And I said to myself while listening to him, because, we can do two things at one time, as it turns out, I said, this is it.
Mm.
It's not acting. It's not anything else. It's this. This is what I'm meant to do. And I was absolutely certain. There was not 1 minute of doubt. I shut down right after the session. I shut down my acting. Maybe I went to a few more classes. I don't know but I was, I had met my Eskimo in acting class. We had been drunks together, and she had gotten sober, and I said, God, I'm so impressed. You go, girl. And she said, well, you can do. No, I can't. No, I can't. You know. But then eventually I did a few months later. And so I just put one foot in front of the other and immediately started working to build practice. I started speaking in different treatment centers and going to all the places one goes, and I schlepped everywhere. And again, there was none of this available, which I'm very happy about. So it was, chop wood, carry water, chop wood, carry water, chop wood,
Knock
carry
on
water,
doors, call people.
knock
Like,
on doors, call people, go to meetings, talk about what you're doing a little bit. You don't look for people, but people come. And very quickly my practice. And by the time I had all my hours, which I worked 40 hours a week in the clinic while running my business and while going to school, because, I was going to be that moving target, and I did it well. But it still took, several years. It's not, 40 hours a week is into 3,000, doesn't, takes a minute. So, and I learned a lot, and I started to practice, and that's that. That's that. And I have been excited and honored, and I just love the work. I'm at a place in my life, having done it for all of these years. So, long, many, many years. I'm in a place in my life where I want to reach more people at one time, i.e., the podcast,
yeah.
i.e., the speaking engagements I've begun to do I've always been a speaker, but in a broader way, because I just want to reach more people, because the truth is that as my teacher taught me, my beloved 17-year teacher, who's a very Jungian and all these things. And he said, there were only 7 to 10 stories. And he would never tell us what they were. We always had to figure that out. But 7 to 10 stories. So you're hearing those 7 stories over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know about you at this point, because you've been in the business for 20 years, you said, or something like
Yeah.
that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I can hear maybe a paragraph of a story, and I'm reading people also from the inside out at the same time. And I know where the story is going. I might not know the details. Was it father that did it, or mother that did it, or a neighbor, or whatever? But I know what's going to happen, and I know where the story is going, which makes me look kind of like a genius, but really it is not that.
Yeah, I think a
It is,
big part what changed for me was when I first started, I thought I needed to hear and learn so much about like the substance or the particular behavior. And I thought that
yeah.
the more I would learn about that, I would have more insight. But then I've realized the more I do it now, I need to hear about the things outside of the substance. That's more about the person. That makes them unique versus the person who I just saw drinking alcohol versus the third person who I'm seeing now who's also drinking alcohol. But it's not about the alcohol as much that I need to hear about and learn about. It's behind all that, what's buried underneath that I've
What
realized
we,
now it's
yeah,
more important.
what we call the ism, right?
Yeah.
Because the ism was there from the gate, or, early on, was magnified by our circumstances, amplified by our experiences and our belief about what those circumstances meant about us. And then, then we started looking for solutions. And for us, the solutions included substances or gambling or sexing or whatever it is, right? Now the internet, oh,
Yeah.
social media addiction, that's a new fave, all stuff to shut us down, you
Yeah.
know, to keep us from feeling and
What
connecting.
One
Yeah.
thing I appreciated throughout your book, so that I love the way you wrote about some things that to me, I read them and I was like, all right, this is raw, this is authentic. She's not holding back punches, but you're also not throwing punches to hurt. So I just want to share some of these real change, like real faith is a greased pig we must repeatedly wrestle to the ground. I think sometimes when people hear that, they're like, oh, it's really tough because like how many times is this going to take? Or when I go into this treatment program, I am hoping this is what's going to work. And even the loved
Right.
ones, right? Family
Right.
members, loved ones are hoping that. And there's another thing that you talk about pain. You know, you were saying it's funny how often the best teachings come from pain. Funny
Mhm.
how those teachings invariably startle. It seems unfair, but humans are hard-headed and waking up is no small matter. I feel like your style of writing has such this balance of being very authentic and tell it to you, but also not leaving people like feeling hopeless or that like it's a doom and gloom. Like there's this balance of authenticity, genuine. Let me give it to you. There's another thing we talk about like how it's a delicate balance of cards, like a house of cards. Sayings like that really stuck with me as I read throughout your book. And I'm just curious, is that kind of like your style? Is that
That
you
is.
recognize like that's how you put things into phrases and say things in
Yeah,
ways
I
like
do
that?
recognize that. Thank you so much for noticing that. That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, I'm really focused because this is what worked for me. I'm focused on self-responsibility for the choices we make, and how we can really embrace those choices, see how that change is possible by changing the way we see things, right? We can't change the story itself. It is what it is, you know. I mean, I opened a phone sex company, you know, there's nothing that's not going to suddenly become not true, right? But how do I see that? Or I went to boarding school for 11 years. How do I see that? Eventually, I saw it as a gift, but it took some time. I was in a violent relationship. Eventually, I saw the value of that and how I chose that relationship. And so I think it's very empowering to see both sides of it. You know, I think there are victimizers, but there are no victims, you know, short of the children who are victims. And then, you know, but then do we keep victimizing ourselves throughout our lives? You know, and I'm anxious and happy to have you have that, for have other people to have the takeaway that you have had from this, that yes, uh, these are the things that turn us into the good people we really always wanted to be,
And
you know?
I think you balance that because normally we say, you know, when it comes to things that are pleasure, it's green lights, pedal to the metal, go. When it's pain, it's red light, stop. And but then you even mentioned it earlier in our talk where it's like these are opposing things, which you're talking about is that like we need to see that they are like how the relationship with them and how close they are, but not trying to just like pull away for more almost disconnection that like all pain must be removed and not be a part of that. Like we
No.
don't want the pain, but like life, that is what it is to be human.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the greatness of being human. And that's what connects us. You know, people are always coming to me saying, well, I'll make a suggestion, right? And I think of myself, I call myself a practical visionary. I see things, I see you, I see in you, I hear in you, I feel in you. I have, of course, lots of answers, as pretty much everybody has answers about everybody else if they know how to listen to themselves. Um, but the thing is, what are you ready to hear? That's the art of being the therapeutic counselor or whatever it is. It's what is the person ready to hear, and how do I talk differently to this person than to this person? And what are they? But wait, what was your question? I went off on myself and forgot your question. Wait, you were making a statement about,
That balance of
oh, the
where,
balance.
yeah, like of where we tend to think of like pain, avoid,
Oh,
pleasure,
yeah. People will say to
seek.
me, they'll say, well, that's uncomfortable for me. That would
Yeah.
be, I go, good. Let me tell you where comfort is, laying on your couch with the remote in your hand. There's no change in that. Nothing's going to happen if you're comfortable. You need to be uncomfortable. You need to move towards that which pattern interrupts you. Yeah. So that you're not doing what, if you do what you've done, you'll get what you've got, right? That's an old
Yeah.
knowing. Everybody knows that. But then really paying attention to it. So it's uncomfortable. So what? I don't understand what you're saying. Uh, Try it. What's the worst that can happen? It's what I say to people about sobriety. Listen, you don't think you have a problem? Okay. Other people seem to think, try it for 30 days or 60 days. You can always take your addiction back. It's just waiting right there beside you. lounging.
and it creates like a really like a pain intolerance where
Yeah,
even like the slightest like we want to talk about pain because there are things that are incredibly hurtful and you
sure.
experience, but also like that pain is not the same as sometimes what becomes so painful that is this really painful or is this uncomfortable? Is this really hurt or is this just, kind of awkward? But when you don't put yourself in those positions to step outside of a comfort zone or to kind of challenge that, it can be the slightest thing becomes a
It can.
very reactionary to a like real significant pain response when not all that pain is on that same severity.
That's right. But of course, we're very dramatic as addicts, and it's all so big. But also, it stands on the shoulders of very old wounds. So the
Hmm.
phrase is, and I believe in the book, is that the older the material, the bigger the reaction, the older the material. Or as they say on the East Coast, if it's hysterical, it's historical.
Yeah.
And so that's the deal. If it's a huge, huge thing to you that someone looked at you the wrong way or whatever, you're not even there. You're not in that moment. You're in some ancient moment, in some very small person moment, and that small person has never been healed, has never been held and loved and ministered to and nurtured or whatever it is. They've been forgotten, and we are the ones responsible for remembering them. There is not enough love in the world, from my point of view. There's not enough love in the world coming towards you that will fix your inner pain. It's just not. And look at all the celebrities that can't get sober, that are now dead, that kill themselves, that overdose, whatever they do. They have it all. They're good looking. They got money to burn. They've got, accolades coming out of their, what. I mean, it's all there, but they can't feel it.
Hmm.
It's that wonderful line from Postcards from the Edge, one of my favorite movies ever, when she says, "Oh, my life is great. I'm just not in my life."
Mm.
And that's the piece. When do we get brave enough to be in life on life's terms? It's not always, sometimes it rains, sometimes it snows, sometimes it's hard to walk outside, whatever it is. It's, our love life is disappointing, our love life is fabulous. All sorts of things happen that are not, they're just life. It's just life. And if we don't know how to greet that life as if it's as if we're lucky to have it, whatever it is, we're going to have a dreadful journey,
Yeah,
a
one of my
dreadful.
favorite books, I haven't read in a while, but it was Pain, the Gift Nobody Wants, and it was Life Without Pain Can Really Hurt. I thought it was one of the most incredible
That's
titles.
cool. I've never heard that.
Yeah, very, very older book, but it really just talked about how pain it for one to be able to experience it and to not experience it is where he says like it can hurt when you can't feel pain. Like it can cause
It
damage
can
when you can't feel pain.
Absolutely. And
And
I believe in the mind body spirit connection too. So I've seen a lot of somatizing, and I bet you have too, where people, they're not really getting it. They're not really getting it full-heartedly and doing it. That little ledge between I know what taking full responsibility for my part is, and oh yeah, I'm sorry. It's it's a big piece, right? And so those people have, very often it will go directly into their body, directly, and they will have, they have lots of illness, or they have Crohn's, or they have fibromyalgia, or they have all the things, chronic fatigue. They did profiles on chronic fatigue, and it was women who were A-type personalities who wouldn't slow down for the most part. I mean, let's look at what's happening here, you know? And so if you're running, 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 you're not being. And
yeah.
that's the trick.
One thing I want to ask you about, and I'm sure this could be another long conversation, but I feel like it needs to get brought up because it's one of the things I learned most by reading your book was I was expecting stuff about the addiction and some of the recovery and kind of all that mental health stuff. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the second half gets into a lot of being the caretaker for Conrad.
Hmm.
And I was really not expecting so much of the detail and how you talk about that. And I don't know if I have a question, but I just want to kind of say that I don't know if I've ever read a book that would be so valuable to people who are in that position of being a caretaker. There's not a lot of resources out there for people in that position and what it's
That's right.
like. And you were I thought you were did such a great job of sharing not only what he was experiencing, but also what you were experiencing, being honest about some of the thoughts you were having as some stuff was going on, what it was like interacting with all the providers, the medical staff. To me, like, I don't always work with people who are in that position, but I know a lot of clinicians who work with people who are all of a sudden caretakers. And to me, this is almost an amazing resource for them, even if it wasn't meant to be or if it wasn't designed that way, but it does hold a lot of value for that. So,
Thank you so
I,
much for
yeah, I don't know if
noticing. Again, what a great catch. It was actually, it was designed in the sense of, I wasn't thinking resource for care, but I was thinking this is such a personal, but also transpersonal experience that I'm having. And it's like when, I'll have mothers sit with me often and they go, I gotta tell you something. I really hated my kid today. I just wanted to choke her. And I go, yeah, I've never heard a mother not say that to me at some point. Really? It's that kind of secret. And it's the same thing with caregivers. The and I always say, be careful what you say you refuse to have in your life. That I was never going to be a nurse thing that I write about. That was the last thing on my list. I'm an empath. It's painful physically for me to see people in pain. I don't want to hear about your surgery. I go like this. My clients know pillage, beatings, throttling, whatever it is, I'm good, but please don't tell me about your surgery. But there I am, in this position, and it allowed me and taught me to rise above my selfishness, which is, just because I got sober doesn't mean it's not intact, right? And my ego, and it's not supposed to be this way. And I mean, I think he was a lot older than me, but anyway, uh, it was, and the resentments that I had to just hurdle over, the resentments going into the illness that I had about our marriage and what happened in it, and all the things. And I mean, there were great parts and there were awful parts. And so being in service, it was really taught me what being in service to love in a real way is. It's so gratifying when I work with clients one by one or couple by couple or group by group, and I get to see the growth and I get to see the pushback. And I know it's not personal and it's all the things that you have to understand to be a good facilitator. And I had these just glorious, brilliant moments where it really is a sacred experience from time to time. And then they leave, and I'm free to just be me, whatever that means. I'm still that person. I mean, what you see with me is always what you get. So this is different. This was 24/7 service. I basically didn't sleep for 2 years. And it was COVID, and it was, all the things, and all those people in our house. I mean, the caregivers alone dealing with the personalities it was just, I'd like to say it was awe-inspiring, but it was maybe something else inspiring. But, but all of it made me rise up within myself, made me really work with. And there's this part in there where I was talking to a mentor of mine who died this year, or just in 25, it was 24, one of those. And her entire, she had been a therapist at one point, and then she moved just into psychic stuff and whatever. And healing people through wisdom, but she mainly worked with walking people into death. And so I thought, well, who better to check in with, right? And I called her, and as you saw in the book, and I said, I am not being gracious and graceful about this. I get mad. I want to yell at him. I'm irritated. He's got his dementia's kicking in, and that's annoying. It's just all these things. And I want to do this beautifully. What do I do? And she said, no, no. Have the relationship you've always had with him. That's what he needs. He needs integrity. He needs, yes, of course, vulnerability, but he needs you to be who you are. And it's the minute she said that, a whole bunch of my resentment dissolved. It's like, oh, I don't have to be great in this. And then I was greater in it. She gave me permission. But I was in this place of, I've got to do this all perfectly and do it right. And I can't have a bad moment. And, 18 months is a long time to not have a bad moment. And I have a very, healthy emotional life. So it's, I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm glad, I'm terrified, I'm all the things, from time to time. So it was a great teaching. And what happens is, so the patient has one job: to get better. It's like new sobriety. We have one job: to get sober. I know a lot of people, and I bet you do too, who keep going out because the process of getting sober is easier than the process of living sober.
Yeah.
Living sober it's a different thing. It's a grown-up thing. And it's, so the patient is just getting well. The caregiver is witness and helper and hoper and faithful and faithless and all the things that happen when you're the caregiver. Terrified, powerless. Oh, the powerlessness. And so I did really want to hit those notes. And then what happens when they die? How people are with you around that, because people have a lot of stuff about death and dying, of course. What happens then? The things they can say to you that are so like nutty things. Well, when are you moving on with all of it? I mean, I don't know. It's been a week. Give me a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those kinds of things. But also
It's okay. It's okay. It's not okay.
It's
not
okay.
okay.
He's with you. He's still with you. Really? Did you have information I don't have? I don't know. But the idea is that also for me, I was reminded during that, which was breathtakingly beautiful, of how many guides and guards I've had along the way of my life. Because believe me when I tell you I should be dead. I took a lot of chances I should not have taken, and I should not have lived through them. And so, but all of these people, like the fellow who walked me through the circumstances of his burial and all of that, and his name was Shields. I mean, it doesn't get better. If I put it in a movie, they'd say, "Oh, that's too on the head. Let's change the name." I mean, it just the kindness that I was offered, the kindness of strangers, and then you also see who are the people who step up and who are the people who step out. And a lot comes forward. A lot comes forward. And it was a very magical time for me. And the magic was, it was like the darkest night being just flooded with instances of light, shards of light coming in and shafts of light. And so it was a growing period for sure. Now, I have had a life where seeking and growing was always my intention. I did it sometimes very badly, very, very badly. I had, times where I didn't do any growing really until afterwards when I was reconnoitering with my experiences. But I came out of it a different person, and I really feel, and I never expected this, that I have left my traumatized self behind. That doesn't mean I don't look at it and I see her over there and all the things she did and all the choices she made, but my DNA feels rearranged. I still have flares of anger and have to apologize for them right away. Damn 10th step. And, I still have insecurities from time to time. My partner is so extraordinary. I think, oh my God, is he going to disappear? He's so extraordinary. I've never had a partner before. And it gets strange, and I have a lot of new learning curves because I had no family. He's got a billion people family, and I'm learning to have family. And it's just an extraordinary time. And I have this wonderful astrologer. Some people believe in astrology, some people don't. This man was the son. His name is Lawrence Hillman, and he's just a delightful person. And he's the son of James Hillman, who is a very kind of grouchy Jungian, now dead, but he grew up in that kind of a household. So he does mythological therapy, really, with archetypes and all kinds of things. Not therapy, astrology. But when he looked at my chart, as when if anybody believes these things, it's all pattern to me. So I'm just fascinated by pattern. And he said, we look at, there's nothing in my beginning of my life. Like, it's almost empty. There's very little going on. And everything is in the last quarter of my life. All of the things, basically, certainly the last half, but even the last quarter, all the things, all the discoveries, all the brilliance, all the, the settling into self, and all of that is in that. And that has turned out to be true. Now, when I was a kid and some astrologer would tell me that, I would be very pissed off. Like, okay, so you're saying in about 700 years, I'll be good.
Let the clock down begin.
Let the clock down begin. I think my Achilles heel has always been, and still is, my lack of patience. And I work hard to try to stay present in this moment, this lovely moment, being with someone who's actually read the book and has so many wonderful things to say about it. I really appreciate you for that. And but it's hard to stay present. It is hard.
I think one of my favorite things to help with the patience thing is, like, sometimes we got to slow down before we speed up, which tells me that we're not. I think sometimes the struggle with patience is like, I'm going to be stuck here and not being able to go. But to me, sometimes it's not that you're not going to go, but sometimes there's a moment to slow down before we actually get to speed up. And
right.
That helps me with that. But I do want to say, for the whole, that I didn't expect that when I read the book, to learn so much about that aspect of being the caregiver and what that went through. And I think that's something that readers are going to take a lot away from as well, because I've heard I've read a lot of books from, podcast guests, and a lot of them have stories of some loss and some other things. And yours really spent a lot of time talking about it. Others I sometimes have read, and it's like, this is what happened, and all of a sudden the person was gone, and let's get back to the story of what was going on. But there was so much that you put into about talking through it, and I can only imagine what that meant to then go through and to write about it. So I just wanted to point that out in our conversation, because it might not have been what some people expect when they're going to pick this up and read it.
I think it isn't. I had one person say to me, a family member of Tom's, said there was a lot about his dying. And I got a little self-conscious when he said that, and I thought, oh, did I write too much about it? You want to take that one criticism. I mean, he loved the book, loved it, but there was that. He said I was a little, and I thought, well, maybe I went on too long, but you should see what it was like initially. There's a lot of dead dead babies, so to speak, on the floor when you write. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that don't make the cut because you have to follow some streams. And But it was such an important part of my own evolution, of my relationship to healing, others and myself, of my moving into even a new kind of honesty about who I am and how I roll, and also the father material. When we partner, people hate this conversation, especially in California. When we partner with an older person, we are in parental material. There's no way around it. You can tell yourself anything you want. Oh no, she's really mature for her, says the 50-year-old man dating somebody 25. Yes, I'm sure. So now she's 35. You're still 50. And so it's all fine. I knew what I was doing psychologically when I partnered with someone early. That did not make me turn away from it. I was just aware. And I'm not saying everybody should turn away from it, but that father resolution piece was really important to me. And I didn't do it consciously, but I recognized what I was doing while I was doing it. And so really being in service at that point to the dying father on so many levels,
Hmm.
was important.
Yeah.
And also, I have reverence for the caregivers, and I don't think they get enough. I don't think they're considered enough generally.
Nope, absolutely not. Which is why I think it does a great job of describing that experience to a lot of in depth of what that goes through. So, all right, I can imagine we could talk for hours, which is nothing wrong with that. It just means we're gonna have to have you back and everything.
I'm
But
in.
but from what we've talked about today, anything lasting you'd want to leave with audience members, your final take for our discussion and just in general. Here's your moment to kind of give that to the
Okay.
audience.
Okay. In this conversation, what comes forward in answer to that question is no matter where you are, no matter what struggles you're having, no matter what your desires are, no matter what age you are, how accomplished you are or aren't, how addicted you are or aren't, no matter what, it is never too late to change. There is gold at the end of the rainbow, but you have to walk through the rain first.
I like that. I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Nikki, for joining. And the book, it was amazing. I love the humor. I love the genuineness. I love the not holding back, but also not, striking to harm. That balance was definitely poetic, as you have definitely the ability to write and reach people through the way that you do that. So we're gonna
Thank
have
you so much.
links for people where they can learn more about
Great,
you, find the
great.
book. But I really want to thank you for the time today to talk.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much for the style of your listening and the way you spoke with me about this. You struck a wonderful chord of appreciation and without, ickiness. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Aren't I a wordsmith? Ickiness.
yeah,
So I really appreciate that. And I do want to say to the listeners that, I read in the audiobook, I read it myself. So you get a slightly different version of the book because that's just what happens when you read your own book, or at least it was for me. And so that's fun too, if people want to listen instead of read. I always have to say that today. Do you read or listen? Yeah.
yeah.
And a lot of people listen. So.
No, I think your book would, having you read it would make it even more of what it is. Because then they get to hear how you are with how you speak and your humor, and I think it wouldn't work nearly as well if someone else read it. So that's amazing because not everyone can have that. So that's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was excited. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Nikki. It's been wonderful. Appreciate it and looking forward to more conversations in the future.
As am I. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's Andrew J. SCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media, Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.